Välkommen allesammans, continuing our series of the gods and deities translated and interpreted from Norse mythology. Today we are speaking about Folkvangr. I've done a couple videos on other afterlives, Hel and Valhalla, and the underworld, afterlife in general in the Norse beliefs, but an overlooked afterlife is Folkvangr, the realm of Freyja, and it is just important as Valhalla, it seems, even though we don't have as many sources about it. So half the men who die in battle go to Valhalla, and half the men who die in battle go to Folkvangr. It's the realm of the highest female goddess Freyja, and I've had some, we'll say for here, some vivid experiences dealing with this, so that's all I'll say here. That's private stuff for Patreon, but out here on the open internet, we are focusing on the sources, so that's what we are doing in this video, going over all the sources and interpretations of Folkvangr. So as usual, we will go over the meaning and etymology of the word first. In Old Norse, it can mean field of the host, or people field, or army field, something like that, coming from Old Norse folk. People, army, host. From the earlier Proto-Germanic fulka, people or tribe, and it's cognate with fulkas, were a crowd or army. And adding the part vangr, meaning garden, field, meadow, coming from Proto-Germanic vangas, field, meadow, or slope. So that one is a pretty clear etymology, unlike some of the other words that we have covered in this series. The question is, why did they call this afterlife by this name? Is this an afterlife really perceived as a meadow or field where people would go when they died and that's what they experienced? Or is there a more poetical, kind of deep hidden meaning to it? I don't know, you guys tell me. So we can think about, I'll come back to that at the end of the video, but think about the traits of a meadow or field. What is it like? What are the characteristics of it? Meadows or fields, could it have some symbolism to it relating to death or afterlife? I'll cover that at the end of the video, but for now, let us know if you guys have any thoughts in the comments. On to the attestations. So I've done a couple videos on Valhalla, Hel, the afterlives, the underworld in general. Those videos are all right here, and there's some great stuff there, and I'll maybe do a compare and contrast video later on about all the locations of the afterlife, but for now we're purely focusing on the sources of Folkvangr. There are not many. One in the Poetic Edda, which is the most reliable pagan source, the poem Grimnismal. The homes of the gods are being listed there in the first part of the poem, and it says here that the ninth that they speak about is Folkvangr, where Freyja resides, and she selects half the dead every day, and it is her who selects and who shall have the seats in the hall, who gets those. And Odin gets the other half, which will go to Valhalla, of course. Next is in the Prose Edda, written by Snorri Sturluson, a Christian, a couple hundred years after the Viking Age, and he basically says the same thing. One part in Gylfaginning is just listed as Freyja's abode here. And another part of the Prose Edda, Snorri goes into a bit more detail, but basically repeats what we already know from Grimnismal, and he even quotes that stanza too, right here. But with a little extra info coming in the Poetic Edda Skaldskaparmal section. Freyja's hall is mentioned. Within the realm of Folkvangr, there is a hall called Sesrumnir. Sesrumnir is also the name of a ship listed later on in the Prose Edda, like you see here. So Sesrumnir can mean seat room or seat roomer, or an open space with many or roomy seats, as translated by Rudolf Simek. So inside Freyja's afterlife realm of Folkvangr, there is a hall in there as well, and potentially it is also a ship or some sort of sea vessel that is a space with room for many, many seats. Okay, so we're getting a little bit more clues here now. We have another. It doesn't mention Folkvangr or Seasrumnir by name, but it mentions a realm and a hall of Freyja. And here it says how if Freyja's hall is locked, only she can allow someone in. I find that one very interesting. Like in the Viking Age, if someone wanted to come into a hall, it wouldn't be that difficult to just break down the door in a raid and storm it. Okay, so here when it says specifically nobody can enter unless Freyja gives them permission, it's like it's alluding to something else. This is very, very important there that we'll come back to. Anyway, last source in Egils Saga, again, it doesn't mention Freyja's realm, Folkvangr, or the hall, but Egil's daughter, Turgerd, is starving herself because her dad is sick, and Egil will die soon, and she doesn't want to live a life without her father and brother, like you see here. So that's a very cool part. First of all, it's yet another example how caring and loving family members were for each other during the Viking Age. I don't want to live without you, father and brother. This is my number one biggest pet peeve and misconception about the Viking Age, the love that they had for their families, friends, community. That is simply not portrayed at all in the mainstream, but you find it everywhere in the sagas and the real historical sources. But also, apparently here it was a belief that women could go to Freyja in the afterlife as well in Folkvangr. So this is, to my knowledge, the only attestation that shows women could in fact go to a heavenly afterlife as well, whereas all the other sources specifically only point to men who die by weapons could go to Valhalla or Folkvangr. So there's one saying that women can in fact go to these places. So that's it. That's just 4 very vague mentions of Folkvangr or Freyja's realm as an afterlife in the various sources. There's not a whole lot we can learn from all of that. Definitely don't know what Folkvangr was like for those who were there. But there are some very cool theories from the scholars that can definitely give us some new perspectives. Some theories say how Folkvangr, like Valhalla too, was actually not that old of a concept. It was a late addition to the religion that we don't find coming up until the late Viking Age and the time that Grimnismal was written. And there's no evidence, basically, that this afterlife existed before that. It's true, but there's more to the story than that. We find this concept of a heavenly field afterlife in numerous other older texts. Himmingvangr, the fields of the heaven or sky, that occurs in Helgakvida, and that is one of the oldest poems that we can date to the early Viking Age, but origins of it were many hundreds of years before the Viking Age. We also have something called Hebenvang, which is in the older Saxon text, the Heiland, which is a Christian source in nature, but there are many things in there which have much, much older pagan origin, very clear. We also have the old English words, Nerksauavang and the Gothic Vugs, and they both meant paradise, and these are all etymologically related to Vangr. So very clearly there is some association with the afterlife and heavenly meadows or fields or plains in the Germanic religion, and this heavenly realm like that has those traits. And even older, if we go back to the ancient Greek afterlife, Elysium, or the Roman afterlife, also the Elysian fields, whatever, same thing. It's a heavenly place where the warriors go after they die, or the most honorable go after they die, and it's a plain. It's a big, open, heavenly field. So it absolutely could be part of a much older Indo-European concept of the afterlife. Another theory is about these stone ships. A couple scholars have linked a connection between Folkvangr, Seasrumnir, and the stone ships found throughout Scandinavia. So just like Seasrumnir is a ship or potentially a hall in Folkvangr, it's a field/meadow in the afterlife. All of these stone ships are in an open field or meadow. There are none of these that are in like a dense forest or rocky area or anything like that. It's all plains and meadows. I'm showing you a couple pictures. in videos here, but you can watch the video I did with Tom from Survive the Jive on this exact subject, and I really believe this from experience that we can say here, that these stone ships were a very special place where people could engage in practices, rituals, to aid them in underworld journeys or upper world or heavenly journeys, and whatever type of shamanic ritual or whatever you want to call it. One more theory. Quite a few scholars have drawn a connection to Freyja and Isis from the Mediterranean and especially the Egyptian religion. Tacitus wrote about the Germanic tribes in the 1st century and how one tribe in particular venerated Isis, and it was he was puzzled how they came to worship this seemingly foreign goddess, except for the fact that Isis was represented by the symbol of a galley, which is a type of ship. So among that and other things had led some to theorize that Isis and Freyja were one and the same goddess if we go back far enough. It's too long to cover here. I will do another video on all that if you guys are interested. But very interesting there as well. Another theory that you will find a little bit about this in Vegard Solheim's books and Vikings books. They explain it very well. I respect those two probably the most for their complete analysis of the mythology, instead of every other scholar just taking little bits and pieces here and there, and not really forming everything, not merely making the effort to do everything as a whole. But these two in their books make a great effort to explain our full mythology. And I'm paraphrasing here, so definitely read their books for a full explanation. But they relate Folkvangr to the womb, and of course Freyja being the egg. The Freyja chooses who will be admitted to her realm, Folkvangr. And remember in a couple sources how only Freyja selects the ones who are supposed to be let in. If her hall is locked, nobody can get in unless she lets them in. I don't think that hall refers to a woman's vagina, you know. Just like a Viking could force themselves into a hall, break down the door, and go raiding, they could also force themselves between a woman's legs if they wanted to, but they cannot force the pregnancy, and they cannot force the egg to accept the seed that they plant. That is decided by the mighty Freyja, which is why she lets in people. She can only let in people to the hall. So I think the hall represents either the womb or the uterus or whatever, something like that. This makes the most sense. Absolutely believe that. Freyr, in most of the myths, Freyja's brother, clearly represents the seed or the sperm. Freyja being the egg, of course. That's why Freyja and Freyja are accused of incest. It's because that's what they represent. The womb could be seen as Folkvangr, and the ship Sesrumnir, or the hall Sesrumnir, is the vessel that we are transported into to be reincarnated. Just like the ships look like an entrance to the female reproductive system, just like these stone ships and these galleys, these specific type of ships like that. Just like, you can even say just like the puss has a little bit of fuzz on the outside of it, just like these stone ships, they're not covered in dense vegetation. It's not long hair down there, but it's relatively short grass and growth in a field or meadow. For me, it's again, it all comes full circle. And when you look at these things completely, like all things in nature that have a similar function, they have similar traits and even appearances as well. And not to say that I believe that Folkvangr is all symbolic like that. I definitely believe Folkvangr is a spiritual realm as well. I absolutely believe that. But that's why our myths are so beautiful. They're so complex. They can represent many different things. They can be very real things in other spiritual realms, and they can also very clearly represent parts that we can perceive in our nature, universe, and own bodies. It's not atheism, it's animism, and these are very real parts of our bodies and nature on the universe that they have there. It could be that when we die, most of us will go to hell, just like just like in the Old Norse religion, plenty of sources for that. Then wading through hell, going through the journey through hell, that is going through that, and you wait to be reborn. But the most honorable of us, who are selected by Freyja or Odin, they are sent to a different realm than hell, and they are to be reincarnated right away, where if we go to Folkvangr, maybe the consciousness gets put on reset once Freyja accepts the egg and our spirit into her, to our mothers. Whatever, that's my belief, based on the sources and some more personal experience as well, but you all have to form your own beliefs. Let us know if you have any other thoughts or ideas down below in the comments. That's why I make these videos. The real question is, what is Folkvangr like? I won't speak about that here, and we don't have any sources on that anyway, what this particular afterlife was like, whereas we do have sources on what Hel and Valhalla was like, but we do have parallels, like I mentioned. Elysium is one of them from the Roman Greek, and I will be doing the research on that. I'll be away for the next few weeks in Greece, where I will be looking into that, taking a deep dive a little bit more, so there won't be any videos from me for a little while, but stay tuned for more. But that's all for today. Vi ses nästa gång.